right now. So this it is being recorded. My hope is that we can play this a couple of other times on MMN for people who either had conflicts tonight or they have to get out a little earlier or just want to recap. And really what we're hoping to do tonight is just give an overview of sort of how we got to here. I think that there's been a lot of discussion, certainly at the select board finance committee level, about sort of the impacts of COVID, both on the capital and the operating budgets. And, you know, we are clearly very, very cognizant of that and trying to, you know, have something that we're not going to over deliver, overspend, but I think it's important for people to just get a refresher because this has been about 2.5, 3 years in the making. So if you're like me, I can't remember necessarily what was said and done and what we talked about 3 years ago, but what is good is that we have a bit of a visual history. So I'm going to ask that everybody please turn off the video for themselves, because the way that this is going to record, I want it to capture the full picture of my share screen, and so that would be helpful. And then certainly when we come back, so I'm going to share the screen. We're going to go over just a couple of where have we been, what's going on now, and then I am going to actually turn it over to Delia and Marcia, who are going to just do a brief little update on the boat launch area that that is right on the way on Warner's Pond, and the dredging, because although the project that we're going to be bidding out for the park doesn't include that, that is very much part of the whole, you know, parcel. And then I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Kane, who's just going to talk very briefly about some kind of programming updates and things of that nature. And then Ryan Orr can talk about some of our maintenance plans, which I know people have been worried about and asking questions about. So hopefully we can do that. And then I'll open it up for questions. So these are pretty brief, broad overview. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So this is the initial discussion image from August of 2018. And this was actually first seen when we did an on-site visit while the Gerow home was actually still there. And so we kind of used the Gerow home as a staging place. For those of you who were there, you probably remember we set up a tent in the back, kind of overlooking the pond, to try to, you know, show people sort of, you know, this is what we've purchased, and this is kind of the idea of having this. And so initially, we kind of threw this together, figuring that we needed to have a way to get into the property. And so at the time, this was the newly done Bruce Freeman parking lot, which is existing there. Obviously, this is Com Ave, and the prison is over here. This is the existing driveway. And then this is the existing home that's there. This is before we actually went through and subdivided the lot. So this is really the very initial planning stages here. So the idea was that we were going to come in on the existing driveway, but because it was so steep a drop and it was gravel, we were going to have to, you know, build that up a bit. And it would be a kind of a straight chute in here. There'd be some parking along this portion here. This would be a driveway and another kind of walkway with these connectors to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail 2B, which is here. There'd be another bunch of parking that's here with some connections to a path. This was initially planned to be potentially a bathing beach. We talked about that. I have to say, when we were talking to people, it was really 50-50. And it's funny because people really felt passionate both ways, but nobody really embraced the gray in the middle. No one said, you know, oh, I hate it, or, you know, oh, I don't care either way kind of thing. So we had this in the initial discussion to try to price out what that would cost. And then this was going to be a turnaround effectively. And so between August and November, we had 3 meetings on site and 2 additional at the townhouse. And we talked about this discussion or this discussion image, and the overwhelming majority of the people that we heard from, at least in person, initially were saying, boy, that's a lot of asphalt, and it's going really far into this wooded area. And so we said, okay. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board and worked with engineering at CPW, because what was happening is that there was a level of expectation of the amount of bicycle, foot, and vehicular traffic that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail was going to bring. And so they were utilizing the usage numbers that they were projecting for that to determine the amount of parking spaces. And so what we said was, well, you know, if people want to bike, the majority probably would be either biking, walking, etc., and wouldn't necessarily need a parking space. What we really need is places for people to, you know, curb their bikes, because we didn't want people taking their bikes kind of past this threshold and into the resource area. And so we came up with a new image that was modified such that, well, actually, you know what, and I should mention again, this was going to be the existing pavilion, or this is the pavilion. And this was the composting toilet area. And so what happened is, over time, we ended up having the survey done. Come on. Sorry. We had a survey done, and actually we're able to delineate this parcel right here. And so, as you can see, this had a place where we were thinking of perhaps putting the pavilion in the aforementioned August plan. And so we ended up kind of changing the layout a little bit and trying to truncate most of the activities into this area, leaving this natural woodland that's here. We also ended up shrinking down the parking to half the size of what it was before. And what had happened also that isn't visible on this plan is we actually got rid of this, they're calling it a fire ring, but the reason they call it that, and that was sort of misleading, people were thinking it was going to be for a bonfire, but it was actually a turnaround for a fire engine. So we ended up talking with Chief Judge and made sure that the parking plan that we have now has something where they can back in and do a 3-point turn enough that they can get out, but doesn't need to have this large asphalt area here. We brought this, instead of having the image before where this was wooded with just two plots there, we kind of brought this together, and all these little slats right here are all bike racks and benches, and there's a bike repair station up here. And so we're trying to say, you know, okay, we hope that people will come and use the park, but we believe that there will be as much, if not more, bike parking necessary than vehicle parking. So this parking amount is actually the minimum number that we can have for the permit based on the traffic study through CPW's engineering. And I know that people have asked about, you know, well, do we need as much parking? Whenever, well, the answer is yes. There's a mathematical formula that goes along with that. And so we were able to push the limits as far as we could, but we do need this amount of parking. One of the other things that was early on was there was a fishing pier here, and then this is an accessible canoe and kayak launch. Again, we shortened the beach area a little because this was about the time that the White Pond Associates had approached former town manager Chris Whalen about donating the beach parcel, and we thought, well, we were getting the cost estimates in from ESS regarding the dredging project, and to kind of make this happen was going to be somewhere in the $2.5 to $3 million range just for a small swimming area here and this type of beach area. And that's providing it was going to be permitted. And it seemed like if in fact that is a desire that the community wants, it should be a later phase. And so we kind of backburnered that a bit. In consultation with Delia and other members from planning and the natural resources, we were sort of warned that this particular boardwalk that's running on the, over the water, over the resource area, really probably wouldn't be something that the NRC would support. And we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of the property. And so we ended up getting rid of that as well. And in the later plans, I think you can see that the whole idea was to bring people as close to the water as possible without having them basically take matters into their own hands. And so we have a couple of pathways that dip down into that 50-foot buffer and one that's within the 25. And those of you who have watched the NRC meetings know that we've been talking about that a great deal, but it certainly is different. We have kept a modification of a accessible canoe or kayak launch, but not quite as robust as this. We also moved what would have been right here, the pavilion or band shell. I think we were kind of going back and forth, and actually brought that closer to the middle, because what had happened is really we were plunking a building sort of in the most beautiful, most open, flattest area, and we really wanted to keep that as sort of a reflection area with a couple of stormwater rain gardens, and so we kind of moved that into you're going to drive in, you'll have the asphalt and the hardscape here, and then there'll be sort of the central location that has a restroom facility and a pavilion or something of that nature. Okay, so this is the image that we had right before COVID, and what you can see here is kind of what I was just saying, which is, coming in with the walking paths here. It's hard pack, ADA accessible. These are more stone dust. They are not accessible, but they're still obviously walkable. There's an area here that's just going to be some type of garden with some mature trees. Right here is the stormwater management with a rain garden. There will be a wooden bridge to kind of walk through. So it's very pretty area, some benches. We're going to use some of the boulders that are harvested from on site there. This dip down is something that we're talking with NRC about because it's obviously within the jurisdictional area. And so, we're hoping to bring people as close to the water as possible. If you've been out to the site, this is quite a drop off here. So we want to make sure people, again, aren't taking matters into their own hands and just sliding down on their own. We're trying to bring some canoe and kayak storage up here beyond where the resource area is. And then this is could be a future phase. It isn't something that we're doing right now, but we basically are going to, as our consultants say, give these trees a shave and a haircut in a way that people can kind of drag their non-motorized boat down and launch it from the ground and off there. Same number of parking spaces, but we're utilizing this area in the back that's adjacent to sort of this tree buffer between Bruce Freeman and parking to be able to deal with a little bit more stormwater management, which would have some underground chambers for infiltration basins. This is going to be kind of a patio hardscape, but they're non-porous pavers that are going to come into a restroom building. Now, at the time of this drawing, we were proposing a far more robust, we called it an event barn. It was going to be 3 seasons, not heated, no kitchen facilities. And again, prior to COVID, Recreation had an idea of kind of expanding some of their efforts, particularly in the nicer months, to include sort of a nature's classroom or some type of nature-based camp experience. And so we were looking at a place where we could have, sort of a more structured shade shelter for the purposes of being licensed. But since then, clearly, Recreation has, had to scale back on many of their efforts just due to having to have BD shut down and not having, spring programming, et cetera. And so much of what we were going to use in the fund balance for that has gone. And so we've reverted back to the initial sort of just pavilion, open air pavilion, similar to what you would see at the Ride Out facility, although it's going to be more of a post and beam kind of woodlands rather than sort of the metal roof type of thing, but of that nature. The other thing that we've heard a lot of questions about is the bathroom. So I can tell you that we were very excited to be the hosts of what we're going to have as the first compostable public toilets. And those of you who have been to the town meeting the past couple of years have heard me speak at length about, sort of what we were trying to do there, and sort of how we thought that was going to be a cost savings, and probably would have been, except for when all of the studies were done and the usage was outlined for Bruce Freeman, the amount of persons that were thought to be, the average number of people that are going to be coming and going from this property in an average week was going to be over the threshold that it was going to require a 75% built gray water septic system. And so what that means is we were effectively going to have to build out a septic system into the area for people to wash their hands and for the bathrooms to be clean, and that the system was going to have to be large enough to be able to accommodate anywhere between 150 and 175 people over the average, day or 2-day time frame. And the consultants went back and forth with the Board of Health and the health director for a bit, because it really is up to sort of how the code is read and interpreted. But ultimately, that is the health director's purview, and clearly she knows much more than I about that. And so we were faced with, we have to spend the expense to build a 75% septic. And so that was going to cost, upwards of maybe $65,000, $70,000. For an additional maybe 15, we could just build 100% septic and it would be, available and ready, or we would have to do the 75% septic and then do the composting toilets for an additional $70,000. And so it effectively doubled the price. In addition to that, it turns out that while a lot of the initial soil samples that were in this area turned out to be gravel, because the Gerows had an old gravel pit here on a paper road that they had down in this way when they were thinking of subdividing the property a number of years ago. This particular area was quite sandy, and that came as a bit of a surprise, because again, this whole area over here was very gravel based. And so just by moving it over a bit, it actually ends up being pretty perfect for a septic, in that the leach field doesn't have to have too much underground digging. We don't have to go too far down, and we are above the water line here. And so that's sort of how we ended up with, we either build 75% of a septic and composting toilets to the tune of, say, 120, 130,000, or for about 70,000, we have a fully functioning traditional septic. And so we are still committed to sustainability, and really, kind of were bummed that we weren't going to be able to have this, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be able to put that in some other park, another place. But again, we need to be code compliant. And the other thing that was getting a lot of attention, I believe, particularly from the NRC, but other groups as well, is just sort of this boat launching area. I think people were thinking that it was going to be a little bit more robust than this, and it isn't actually. This is, first of all, not even included in the phase that we're doing, but we're kind of showing what we're trying to do. It really is at this point, we're going to use anything that we're chipping up as far as, brush and other decaying limbs, etc. We're going to try to lay it down here so we have sort of a wood chip base. And then this is the canoe and kayak storage, and people can just bring them down. These are future things if in fact we wanted to do it. I suspect that in a year's time, maybe a year and a half, I think we're going to find that we're going to see foot traffic and evidence that people are coming down here and using this area to fish. And I think we're going to have to, deal with how it is that we can give people a way to do that without disturbing the resource areas. And it's pretty densely thick down here with some of the underbrush. But it's pretty, and there isn't a lot of invasives here, and we have a fear that people might just trample through that in a way to be able to get to the water. And while I don't blame them for that, we're we're going to try to, so we had this on the plan for just for going to NRC because there's a possibility that we may come back and say, gee, we'd really like to do this, and here's the evidence why. There's a possibility that we don't need to do that. And so that is where we're at with at least the initial. I'm wondering if I can, Delia, if I can ask you to unmute, and Marcia, if you can unmute and turn your videos on, and then I will share the screen with what you sent me, Delia, but then I'll mute myself. All right. All right, it did not want, we did not want that one. Now, here we are.
Great. Thanks, Kate. That was a great presentation. I found that very helpful and informative. I actually did not know that the Gerows had a gravel pit there. I did not know that. So if you can just go to the next slide, Kate, or if you want to share the screen with me, I'm happy to drive whatever is easiest for you. Okay. So I thought it might be helpful for the FinCom to just understand a little bit about where we are with the dredging and how we got to this point. So we've been looking at dredging Warner's Pond since the completion of a watershed management plan in 2012. So we had received 2010 CPA funds in order to complete that watershed management plan. So I just wanted to give you, and I'll go through this very quickly. Happy to answer questions at the end, but I thought it's just helpful to kind of understand, you know, this piece of it as it relates to the dredging. So Warner's Pond, you can see here, is in the middle of the frame. It's a 54-acre shallow impoundment. It was created by damming. So down at the base by Commonwealth Ave, that dam was replaced in 2006, 7, 8. It was dammed to operate a sawmill and then a pail factory. Warner's Pond lies at the base of an extensive 75 square mile watershed in 6 towns. And it's just downstream of the confluence of Fort Pond Brook and Neshoba Brook. So it's a little challenging because about 95% of the watershed of Warner's Pond lies outside of Concord's borders. So we have very limited capabilities to control the massive amounts of phosphorus that enter the pond. Since the late 1890s, Warner's Pond has been one of the town's significant natural resources and popular recreation areas. Its ecosystem has provided habitats for numerous species of aquatic plants and animals, and that continues in a limited capacity today. However, since at least the 1980s, the pond is undergoing eutrophication. Now, this is a process that some of you are familiar with. It is a process where water bodies receive an excess of nutrient loading, which results in sediment buildup and increased plant growth. What that means is that there has been a decrease in the recreational ability of paddlers and anglers, as well as a decrease in the ecological health of the pond. It is now dominated by several invasive non-native plants, including water chestnut, milfoil, and fanwort. And the open water habitats of the pond are diminished. They have been diminishing for a long time. If this continues over time, you know, what happens with dug ponds and dammed ponds is that they do eventually fill in. Warners would take a long time to get to that point because the flush rate of this pond is very high. What that means is you've got a massive amount of flow coming in from Neshoba Brook and Fort Pond Brook, such that the volume of water in Warner's Pond cycles out every 24 hours. And this is significant in terms of how we decided to approach management of this resource area. So in 2012, ESS completed a watershed management plan. They looked at all short-term and long-term options for how to manage this eutrophication of the pond, with the eye of providing better ecological value and recreational value for the pond itself. So what they ultimately came up with is, because of the low position in the watershed of the pond, as well as the fact that it's a dammed pond, the best way to accomplish the project goals, and maybe Kate, if you can go to the next slide, was to perform dredging of the pond. Now, what this does, the pond is quite shallow. You know, it ranges from 3 to 7 feet in depth, and it used to be quite a bit deeper. So the goal is to get to a 12-foot depth. And dredging, the way that this is accomplished is you take out, you know, some amount of sediment so that you create an inhospitable ground condition for plants to grow. You also limit the amount of light that is able to get to the bottom of the pond. And all of these will decrease the ability of plant material to grow. So in the top right photograph, you can see this was one of the many hand harvesting efforts of water chestnut, where a canoer is going through the pond and pulling up water chestnut. And in the middle of that photograph, you can see just below the level of the water chestnut is the water milfoil. So this is, you know, even once you get the water chestnut out through hand harvesting, you're still dealing with milfoil. So, you know, there were a number of options that were evaluated during the watershed management plan. There was dredging, there was hydro raking, which actually makes all the, you know, the milfoil and the fanwort, if they're broken up, they resprout and they, you know, proliferate under that kind of mechanism. There was an option to look at a drawdown, but because of the high flush rate of the pond, totally ineffective. Same with herbicides. And so dredging was landed on as a goal, as a strategy to achieve a goal of ecological restoration and improved paddler access for the pond. So that was in 2012. And then using CPA funds, the Natural Resources Division had a feasibility study for dredging developed in 2018 that looked at what it would take to dredge the pond. So there was some sediment analysis, there was, you know, conceptual plans were developed, which I have as part of this presentation if people are interested. It's not, we don't need to go there if people are not. But it basically looked at taking out about 30,000 cubic yards of sediment. Kate, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next frame. So the two dredge areas are notated on this graphic. The South Dredge area is the main dredge area that has always been considered. The Commonwealth Ave boat launch, which currently exists about midway down on Com Ave on the right. You can sort of see it's in the, you know, that area that comes into the pond. That was the primary area of dredge. It's about 30,000 cubic yards. Dredging is a very costly enterprise. If the whole pond were dredged, it would probably cost, you know, between $5 and $8 million to do the south dredge area. The cost was anticipated to be between 1.6 and 1.9 in 2017 dollars. We also, when the town looked to acquired the Gerow piece, you can see the north dredge area was also included and considered for dredging, so that, you know, it was in response to the community's interest in providing a, you know, a swimming, wading beach area. That dredge area is actually fairly insignificant in terms of the price tag associated with it, because a lot of the price tag is already built into the south dredge area. So, you know, I mean, we could or we could not. And I think that's an open question because of the White Pond beach now that the town has access to. And to be honest, I mean, this is an impoundment. And if this pond were dredged, and swimming did occur here, you know, 50 plus years ago, but it was not like swimming at White Pond. You know, if swimming were to be reintroduced at Warner's Pond, it would be swimming with, you know, mucky ground conditions outside of the immediate dredge areas, and, you know, all the associated dug impoundment ponds of, you know, leeches, and it's not the most pleasant place to have swimming. So that's something that, you know, the town can consider. But in any event, the northern dredge area, the cost associated with that was estimated in, again, 2017 dollars to be about $250,000, because all of the mobilization costs and trucking costs with removing sediment are already built into the south dredge area. So these two areas were determined by the consultant to be good areas to dredge because they're outside of the main channel and they would not infill again quickly. So I'm a little skeptical of this, but the consultant estimated in the watershed management plan, and I believe again in the feasibility study, that dredging would provide benefits for 100 years. So that seems a lot to me, but even if it's 50 years, I think that's a substantial benefit that would be provided by this management strategy. If you look at it as 100 years, it's an annualized cost of between $5,000 and $8,000 over that 100-year period.
Delia, may I add, this all came out of the Warner's Pond Stewardship Committee, their interest in doing something to preserve and protect the pond itself. It was an active group in the 2000s. They were quite vocal. They were very supportive of seeking these study funds and pursuing action on the pond itself. And we also have historic data that talks about, you know, the winter value of having a pond that freezes, where you can go ice skating, where you could do different things. Lots of anecdotal information, but with the invasive species just taking over the pond, that reduces the ice and the thickness of the ice. So there are a lot of reasons why there was a great deal of support for pursuing something active with Warner's Pond back in 2008, 2009.
Thanks, Marcia. That's absolutely right. So if you could go to the next slide, Kate, please. This is just looking at another element of the project, which is, this is halfway down Commonwealth Ave. This is where the existing Warner's Pond boat launch is. Any of you who have gone down there are familiar. It's a very rustic, unimproved dirt, you know, access to the pond. Right now, very few people are using it to access Warner's because it is so infilled with invasives. what we would propose to do is provide a 7-space parking lot that includes a handicap access space and a pullout, as you can see in the middle top of the red outline, so that cars could pass freely. So this was estimated to cost about $220,000 in 2017 dollars. And so what we're looking to do in terms of budget is two things. We're looking for CPA funding for $500,000, which would be for dredging costs. That is on the town meeting warrant under the CPA warrant article for this year. And then there's also in the capital plan for 2021, there's $500,000. And then in 2022, there is $1.5 million requested. Marcia and I think that it makes sense to reduce that capital request to $1,250,000 because we have already talked with CPC when we presented last year and said, we're asking for $500,000 now for the dredging, a portion of the dredging costs, and we'll be back next year, so this year, to ask for $250,000 from CPC. So total budget numbers are a total of $2.5 million for the dredging and the boat launch improvements. And the split would be the $500,000 request from this year's town meeting, next year $250,000, and then a total of 1.25 from capital planning.
1.75.
1.75, thank you. Yes.
And that's taking into consideration that the CPA has funded the two studies that have been done for the pond to date.
Right, so we're sort of looking at, we're looking to equalize the funding sources.
Thank you, Kate. Back to you. Thank you. That was great. So the only other thing I wanted to touch on now that we're kind of through what is the project part of it are the finances, because I think that people are obviously interested in that. And so in annual town meeting 2018, we asked for a total of $3 million for the acquisition of the parcel. And 2.5 of that was from the capital and 500 of that was allocated from CPC. We purchased the parcel and closed on July 15th, 2018. And we purchased it for $2.7 million, which left about $300,000 remaining. And with that $300,000, we went out for an RFP, several, but the first RFP went out for a master plan. And the master plan included a full survey, wetland flagging, and a phase 1 analysis, which includes soil testing and contaminants and a little bit of testing along the water's edge, and then some flagging of invasives, etc. And we did a second RFP for the demolition and recycling of the home that was there, the Gerow home, including the oil tank, the well, and the septic and leach field that were there. And lastly, we used a bit of the money to do the complete subdivision of the affordable parcel at the end, including recording it, deeding it to the Concord Housing Authority, and going through all of the recording for that. And so that took most of 2018, from the time that we purchased it up until pretty much the snow hit the ground. And then in 2019, we started another robust effort to kind of go through those plans that I had just done at the beginning of the meeting. And so at 2019's town meeting, so for fiscal year 20, we asked for $1.4 million in park improvements and $200,000 in CPC funds specific for the Gerow property. So at the time of the town meeting in 2019, again, pre-COVID, the idea was that the $1.4 million in park improvements would be spread out among 4 different projects at the time. And the idea was that the White Pond Stormwater Management and ADA project was going to move ahead at the same time as the Gerow Phase 1. And so we would have both of those projects running simultaneously. Obviously that did not happen. And so while it was going to be originally $600,000 for both White and Gerow, that may not be the plan. And we have since put the White Pond project a bit on hold in such that we're slowing the pace down, and we're revising the capital plan. So what would have been heard at this year's town meeting would have been an ask for $500,000 from CPC for the Gerow property and an additional $1.595 million for park improvements, of which, similar to the year before, we would have done $600,000 for White and $600,000 for Gerow. In speaking with the town manager and our chief financial officer and trying to scale down our capital ask for this fiscal year, we reduced the 1.595 ask by about 900,000. And so under that proposed amount, there would be $0 for the Gerow, 500 for White instead of 6. We're taking, it was about 200,000 that was going to go to Rideout, and we're delaying that project, but keeping the 500 for the dredging. And so therefore, as it is today, we have about 1.7 million that is available for Phase 1 of the Gerow project, of which about 200 has already been allocated for design, permitting, and project oversight. So it leaves us with a grand total construction of about 1.5, which is enough to do the hardscapes, the septic, the restroom facility that goes around that, some simple storage, a few site amenities, including a few bike racks and some signage and benches, and obviously the parking area and the new roadway. And that's kind of where we're leaving it. And I think that likely we may come back either in the fiscal year 22 and probably ask for a small amount, depending on how the idea of the fishing pier and boat launch area go. If that proves to be something that the community is not necessarily interested in or using the property for, then certainly we wouldn't. One of the other things that was cut, other than the event barn type of situation, was there was a big ask for a playground or some kind of natural play area that's there. And so we have a space where that could go, but we haven't allocated any funding to that at this time. And so I just want to hand it over to Ryan Kane just to give a brief overview of sort of the conceptual ideas of, how to program the space. And then with the understanding, obviously, that we want the space to be mainly unprogrammed.
Kate, just to clarify, I think you said that 0 for Gerow out of this year and the rest for White Pond. I think you meant 0 for White Pond and the number for Gerow, correct?
No, because we were hoping to use 1.2. So we're going to use the 1.2 from fiscal year, the one that we already have.
Okay.
And so we zeroed out that White Pond amount.
Okay.
So there was 6 to Gerow and 6 to White. Now there's 1.2 to Gerow, 0 to White. We were asking for an additional 6 for White. Now we're going to have 500 is the ask.
Okay.
And we'll be back next fiscal year to ask for the remainder for White.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Regarding programming and how or what we envision and some of the things happening in Gerow, I first want to just start with right now with what's happening in the community and everything. It's very visual, the power of public parks and public spaces right now. And if you go to Emerson or you go to Rideout, you see the community out utilizing it. In fact, so much so that we've had such a trash problem at those two locations that we've had to start trash pickup on a daily basis there. Our community is getting out, using the spaces. They're a great value and a resource to the community asset. And I just, being able to look at that and just understand the value of that and seeing where Gerow can go and expand upon that for the community is exciting to me. Obviously, I'm in recreation, so that's a natural thing that's exciting to me. But I feel like right now it's pretty visible to most of the community and seeing that. So that's the first factor. Is it's just going to be an opportunity for the community to get out and recreate in their own avenue, their own way. Whether it's sitting back and just enjoying the vista, whether it's walking trails, whether it's biking, whether it's throwing a Frisbee around or having a bag bunch, whatever it is, they will be able to get out there and enjoy the place in their own way. Programmatically, what we envision there would be like on the smaller scale of programs, it'd be nice to run some nature programs and either days off from school with smaller groups under the pavilion. It'd be nice to do some health and wellness programs there as well. Sunrise, sunset type of concepts with yoga, meditation, relaxation. Those type of programs would be natural fits in that location to really use the venue to its value and kind of be able to put some programming in there that makes sense and matches with the area. Future down the road, I think, as Kate keeps saying, we'll really be able to see how the community utilizes it and values it. We wouldn't be against doing boating and educating youngsters on kayaking, canoeing, etc., and be able to utilize that for the community. So those would be things that we would love to consider and take a look at. But that's really the component of what we're looking at on programming there. And again, the Rec Commission will be writing a letter of support on this. We spoke about this at the last meeting. They will be doing a letter of support. But again, going back to the value of public spaces was really what they were speaking to. And just having that other location that isn't necessarily the ball fields and the tennis courts is kind of a different element of recreation, and people can get out and kind of enjoy that element. So it's certainly where we're at this stage of the game, and open to any questions that people have or other insight you're looking for, Kate.
Just think we got some questions on some maintenance plans or, usage plans. And again, we have a draft that I had done that I've circulated to town staff based on just sort of what we think the best use and the best way that we can sort of maintain the natural spots there. I did talk about, not allowing bikes past where, the designated bike parking spots are. Of course, you can bike into the park, but we're trying to keep those off the trails, etc. I think the community is sort of 50-50 on whether a dog should be on leash or off leash. So I'm interested in kind of engaging in a dialogue in that with when we get to that point. Certainly we're not going to allow swimming, but I don't believe people would want to do that anyway, but just I think that's important to note. And so, I want to just let Ryan Orr, who's in charge of our facilities and parks and playgrounds crews, just kind of talk about his plans for making sure that it's clean and sanitary, and then we'll open it up.
Okay, yeah. So we have a dedicated staff for parks and playgrounds to take care of cleaning and maintenance. So I mean, COVID-19 has kind of thrown a monkey wrench in a lot of what we're doing. It all depends on when we open the park. I mean, right now it would be, we would be there a couple times a day, cleaning and disinfecting. Who knows what that's going to throw at us in a year or two from now when this is up and running. But we will make sure that we have the staff available to do that. That's how we've been handling White Pond as of right now with the same crew, and that crew will also be managing Gerow. Also, that crew will also be taking care of the landscape and maintenance. As of right now, I'm not really sure whether I would assume that we're going to be winterizing the facility and shutting it down, keeping the main road open for emergency vehicles. I'm not sure how everybody's going to feel about that, but that's our plan as of right now, is that we'll go ahead and shut it down, winterize it, and like I said, make sure that emergency vehicles can get through. If there's any reason why we want to keep it open, we'll have to discuss that and see what it will take to keep that open with the running water. But other than that, I mean, we're going to do what is necessary during the time when it's open to make sure that it's clean and disinfected, and also trash removal. They will be there to remove trash off of the site and put it into a designated area on a daily basis, and take a walk through the area and make sure that we don't. I mean, it's looking clean. And again, like I said, they're going to be there for landscape and everything else. So they'll be looking for fallen limbs or anything else that might be a hazard, or potential limb that could be falling in the area, and we'll be looking at that too. So, anything else that you think would be important to mention, Kate?
No, I don't think at this time. So I can ask everybody if you would like to reinvigorate your video, that would be great, so we can see you. You certainly don't have to. And I'm happy to open it up to any questions. If you have a question for someone in particular, for example, if you wanted to ask Delia or Marsha something, just feel free to say their name, so we make sure that we get the right person unmuted and ready to answer. And it looks like I have Diane Proctor, who raised her hand, and then Mary Hartman next, and then Amy, is it Kaiser?
Kaiser, thank you.
Okay, so we'll do Diane first. If you can unmute yourself, Diane.
Are we going to start with the addresses?
Okay.
Yeah, Diane, if you don't mind, because we're going to just do minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so helpful. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. Kate, I have two questions. One, a lot of statistics, you shared with us a lot of numbers and things. Could you print, where can we find those in print somewhere?
So
aggregate budget number.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do a synopsis of this, and that's going to be part of it. And so I thought that it might be helpful if we wrote up sort of some of the things that we said. I would have the slides that are available, but probably in a smaller form. And then I would have a budget sheet attached to that. We would post it on the website and also on Recreation's website.
Terrific. Thank you so much. This has been so helpful. My second question is the number of aggregate parking spaces. I've heard some concerns about that number. And I don't, there are always concerns. So
Sure.
where are you in the number of parking places now up by Commonwealth Avenue? In that whole area, I didn't see it.
By Commonwealth Avenue. So do you mean in the actual, not including the Bruce Freeman parking lot that's already existing, correct?
Not including the existing parking lot. I guess,
Okay.
Isn't it right where that parking lot is right now, or isn't it meant to be expanded?
Well, actually, why don't I share my screen again just so you can see?
Go ahead.
I just, give me 1 second.
I took camera shots of everything you had up, but I didn't see that particular spot.
Let me, that's an old one, sorry.
And while you're doing that, Kate, I just want to express what I think is the town's, I can't speak for the town, but I can speak for the league. women voters. I mean, I just think there's a tremendous respect and appreciation for the diminution of expenditures right now. I mean, we have no idea what COVID is going to do to the tax base in this town. I don't mean just the number of people who are unemployed or may not be able to pay things, but just the businesses who have so often, helped to support the tax base. I mean, things are fragile. We don't know where they're going to be, and the willingness to kind of put things off and think about them is I know, just deeply appreciated by people, because everyone's feeling everyone's feeling a little fragile.
Sure. I apologize, but it seems like the PowerPoint that I had up before is being cranky and it isn't allowing me to do it. So what I can tell you essentially is that, let me just get rid of this here. Is that the existing parking lot that you see off of Commonwealth Avenue will remain. What is going to change, or I guess enhance it a bit, is that right now, if you were to drive into that parking lot, you can see that there's a sort of a walking path that's there that eventually will connect to Phase 2B. And what will happen is that will become a driveway that is going to cross over the Bruce River Rail Trail and then pick up it. I wish I had an image, so bear with me here, but you come down and it's going to curve like an S and connect with where the existing driveway is now.
Okay.
So we are going to be avoiding all of the driveway that's existing now that kind of comes down the hill and goes over to the side, because that'll be part of the house lot. But we'll pick it up right around where the utility pole is that's existing there, and it will drive straight in, and it'll be 42. That is very distractingly cute.
Yeah, I know.
So cute. 42 spaces.
Okay.
Is what's planned there.
Compared to how many now, Kate?
There are no spaces there now, because what it was is just an existing driveway where
okay. That area is to be expanded. And in part, is this a response to the you have to move it anyway if we're going to be able to put, and I'm on the CPC, so I mean, if we're going to put an affordable housing unit there, I mean, there has to be adjustments.
That's correct.
Is that in part in response to that? So therefore, while we're there, we do it? Or is there another motivation or reason for that?
No, it's 100% in response to making sure that we have an affordable lot that they're able to build on. And so we couldn't do that if we had to use the existing driveway as the entrance to the park, although Marcia's raising her hand.
Yeah, I don't mean to disagree, but it was also a traffic safety perspective. That was a very, very sharp angled driveway. And so people trying to exit from that location would have difficulty getting out and seeing traffic coming and making that left-hand turn. So that also contributed to the conversation.
Okay, thank you. That's just very helpful. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
I think, Mary, you were next, right?
Yeah, I think I was next. Yes, thank you, Kate. First of all, I want to say it was really good to understand all the work that you've been doing. I mean, traffic, parking, dogs, invasives. It's amazing all the work you do, and the summary you gave was great. I guess I should tell you, I live at 16 Concord Green, Unit 6.
Thank you.
I'm the vice chair of the Finance Committee.
I'm sorry, could you, that broke up a little bit. Can you say that one more time?
16 Concord Green, Unit 6. Okay. So I am the vice chair of the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee has been putting a lot of pressure and asking a lot of questions about this particular article. And I wanted to put that in context and explain why our thinking. So we know that we're living in a health crisis. We know that we're living in, you could argue, a political crisis, but we're also living, and I'm echoing what Diane was saying, we're living in an economic crisis as well. Unemployment's high. One of my neighbors told me this morning she got laid off. Another one of my neighbors, her son got laid off. He's not going back to work. So I think we don't really realize that because we're so overwhelmed with the health crisis and the political crisis that we're all living with. But we are living in an economic crisis. And even locally, our schools are spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to bring our kids back to school. They've made a commitment to keep all their staff next year. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on our budgets. So we were asking the town if we could delay some of these capital expenditures, not that they weren't worthy projects, but could we delay them to see how things shake out as far as our economy goes? So I'm really delighted to hear that you're delaying some of the spending for Gerow. And I think that's partly because you allocated the money last year to Gerow. All of it's going to Gerow this year, right? But could we take a minute and just go down the list that was in that article and tell me exactly what is being deferred and what you're still asking for?
I'm sorry, in what article? In the current years?
Article 11, where you're asking, the town is asking for money appropriated for Gerow, for White Pond, for dredging, for Ride Out, for Emerson.
Yeah,
So I'm going to let the town manager answer that.
Yeah, Mary, that's not finalized yet. You guys, we're going to present to the finance committee on August 3rd.
Okay, good
on
enough.
August 6th. So
fair enough.
we are. Kate's right. We are working on that. You know, I think I want to. You know this as the vice chair of the finance committee, soon to be chair of the finance committee. But we are working on debt capital, but that has no impact on FY21. But we do recognize that this may linger beyond FY21 and really reassess our projects. But the idea that not doing some projects that were carried under the debt capital as opposed to the capital outlay, it really wouldn't save anything in FY21.
I understand.
It would have the net of deferring would have the net effect of making all those projects a little more expensive. And so as Kerry LaFleur and I review it with the senior management team, we are looking at both expenditure restraint, which I completely agree with you and Diane on, as well as, but also balancing essential needs for the community. So we will be presenting our recommended revisions, I think, next week.
I understand. I just want to end by saying I'm worried about FY22 almost more than I'm worried about FY21 right now.
We're looking ahead as well. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Is that it, Mary?
That's it. I'm done.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
Amy, you're next. And then I see Jeff Collins has his virtual hand up.
Hi there. Hi everyone. Sorry for the distraction, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating questions that were already answered. It was a little yelly over here earlier with the little guys. So my apologies. So I'm Amy Kaiser. I'm at 294 Commonwealth Avenue. I had one question and then a couple comments, but I'll keep them very quick. Kate, I was wondering if you could clarify for me. You mentioned that there was a mathematical formula that was driving the parking numbers. Is that town zoning? Is that like industry standards? What's driving that?
My understanding is that engineering through CPW has a series of formulas that they have sort of in most of their project planning, and they apply that both to private development and town development. And we had to do a similar exercise with the renovations to Ride Out. And so
Yep.
I have to tell you that it isn't my area of expertise, and it's quite a bit of math, but it basically takes into account the traffic that's already existing in the area and then the perceived traffic based on the uses in the general vicinity. And since it isn't just going to be a park, but a park that's immediately adjacent to a very widely used and soon to be very beautiful completed trail, thanks to Marcia and Delia and their staff. I think that we were at the minimum amount that the engineering division was comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So I'm a member of the West Concord Advisory Committee, but speaking on my own behalf, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much to town staff for continuing to push this through and all this craziness. We're obviously very excited for this improvement, and it will be well used and well appreciated. Two comments that I wanted to relay that came up during the West Concord Advisory Committee, and someone on this list may echo or correct, amend one of them. But on parking, I appreciate the derivation of the rationale for the number provided. One thing I would love to suggest is just given, as you note, how many other ways there are to get to that site, and given how lovely it is today and how close to a pond, it seems a shame to me to add more asphalt in that location than we really, really need. So, you know, in the name of fiscal austerity, perhaps one strategy that the town might consider is planning for those full 48 spaces, but only building a portion of them for the first season, you know, given that they're thousands and thousands of dollars a piece. You know, maybe we build a first phase and then, you know, demonstrate to all of ourselves that we really need more the next season, and then build that. And as someone who lives, you know, not far away and would probably see some cars in front of my house, if that were the case, I would welcome them.
So, Amy, I just want to tell you that as much as I love that idea, I think I equate the parking similar to what I said about the septic, which is that there are some standards that we have to meet in order to be able to get the permit. And so this is the minimum number of allowable spots in order to have a permit to be able to build.
And
So-
if I can add, we
Yeah.
didn't build enough spaces at Rideout to begin with. So we really, really needed those additional parking spaces that were created when we purchased that land, the Anderson land next to Rideout. And Kate did a phenomenal job of putting in the maximum number of spaces, and they're still oversubscribed. There's still people that are parking everywhere else. So I think she's wise to say that this is the number that we need. It is going to be a highly desirable place to go. I'm positive of that.
For the record, the calculations, it was supposed to be 59 spaces, and we wheeled and dealed and whittled, and I don't think that I could reduce it anymore and still be able to get a permit to do the project.
So you were permitting from the planning board? The planning board, you think, would deny the permit on the basis of that?
So no, the planning board doesn't do, I'm just talking about through engineering, and the traffic management plan is through the engineering department with the town.
Okay.
And if I could, I think, Kate, when you were doing the presentation, I don't know if I think the drainage management, like the stormwater management, kind of depends on the parking areas being built with appropriate curbing and drainage to make sure that there's not runoff. Whereas if you didn't fully build out your parking, it would be more difficult to manage stormwater. And the other thing is, I'm going to agree with Marcia. Based on what I've observed in my brief time here, there's insufficient parking at every open space amenity that we have. I mean, you look at White Ponds. I'm told that renting your driveway has become a cottage industry out there, which makes it difficult to control.
The ingenuity, though.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it difficult to control. It makes it difficult to control crowding there. I know Walden Pond, when their parking lot fills up, they close the pond, and that's a way to control crowding, not cars. And people park all over down at the high school. I mean, they park everywhere. And so I'm going to agree with Kate and Delia and Marcia and say, you can't overdo parking in places like this. And I think as a neighbor, Amy, they'd be parking on the street. They would be, you would see overflow that would be disruptive to the neighborhood if we didn't have sufficient parking.
Okay, well, I continue to be skeptical, but I appreciate that you guys make a strong case. I continue to think that green space, would be a better way to address storm management than asphalt, but you guys make a compelling case. The other similar suggestion I was going to make, and I'm guessing, Kate, that it's still tricky to pull up the rendering of the current plan.
I will work on it while you chat.
One other comment that I wanted to relay that came up at the West Concord Advisory Committee meeting was just about how many paths there are, the density of paths in the area. And, for instance, if you look at the size of the depth of a parking space, you may notice that the distance, I'm sorry, there's a lot going on in the background here. The distance between the paths is fairly narrow. And I think, it got me wondering, those comments, whether, all the plans and their locations, it looks nice in plan view, but I wonder in the reality of the space, which glory, the glory of this piece is really just this lovely green area, wooded green area with the pond before it, whether it really needs all that many paths. And I wondered also whether, they really needed to be asphalt, a crushed stone surface that was accessible as well.
They're not all asphalt. They're not, no. Only the ADA plans, only the ADA walkways. The rest are either stone dust or just dirt.
Okay,
Compacted
so yeah,
dirt.
so that's helpful to hear. But that was a concern as well. I think in one spot there were like 4 paths between the parking area and the pond, and just remembering the distance of spaces that felt perhaps like more than we needed. Perhaps in a world of scarce resources, it would be nice to have more lawn, fewer paths.
Yeah,
so those are my
I'll caution you about just the drawing it's an artistic rendition. And so when we went out and walked, particularly with NRC, we were able to sort of figure out that, well, if we move this path southern a little and this one north, then we would just have one larger path versus, so I think what you see on the artistic rendition is our idea of how we're going to get people from point A to point B and B to C and then C back to A. But I don't think that you'll see as much. And again, there's only one paved pathway through for ADA reasons, but the rest are just sort of natural footpaths. And so they could grow in with grass or they could be worn, and I can't get the thing back up because it won't connect to my desktop. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, thank you for your responses.
Sure. Jeff, you are next.
Great, thanks. Jeff Collins, 55 Highland Street. Currently sitting at the calf pasture boat put-in, so I'm a big fan of boat put-ins. But actually, I wonder if Delia and Kate or some combination of speakers could talk about the need for 2 boat put-ins, one on the Gerow land, one on the existing ComAv area. In the context there is picking up on some of Amy's comments, the intensity of use sketched out at Gerow, and trying to think kind of creatively, judiciously about that combination of uses that that was laid out, sort of everyone can find what they're looking for at Gerow. Are we packing too much in, using too much of the site, pushing too far west into the site? And if we're going to improve a boat put in on ComAv, which is existing, do we need to push into the west side of the Gerow land with the path and another boat in, a boat put in, maybe a little, haircut, as Kate described it, could bring people down to the water's edge. That could be appropriate. But both from a budget and an intensity of use perspective, even post dredging, which I do hope happens, I think that given our rivers, White, Walden, et cetera, I can't imagine the intensity of boating use that would require 2 developed boat put-ins.
So I can at least take that from the idea of the boat put-in. That's part of what could be a future phase, but it isn't part of now. It was just, and I talked to that a little, just saying like, this is what it could be, but the area is basically to bring people to the water where they could launch their canoe or kayak, or they could fish, or they could sit. And so that's a very different experience, I believe, than going like where you are right now, which is that you're going and you have the intention of kind of boating, and that's what you're going and you're going to do. And that's what I believe the Commonwealth Ave one is majoritively for. The other area there is more of just getting people to the place where they could sit by the water. When we did the survey and we had it online, the number one thing that people wanted was a place to be able to launch a canoe or a kayak. So we were trying to be responsive to that. And the trail that you see through the woods actually already exists. So really, we were just sort of highlighting the fact that we would take any of the what we refer to as widow makers. So when a tree is like this and it's got this going through it, we're going to remove those and clear up the pathway a little bit. But we certainly aren't looking to bulldoze anything really into. And we went for a pretty extensive walk with NRC. There's a couple of paths that exist through the woods that are currently there. One is very close to the water line, and we are trying to steer people away from that in the hopes that that will grow back in and be less obvious. I'm not sure how successful we're going to be with that, but we aren't looking to do too much into the woodland areas. We heard that loud and clear way back in August of 2018, and we're trying to be very respectful of that.
Thanks.
And just to follow up on what Kate just said, which I agree with, you know, the Commonwealth access, you know, that's been in existence for a long time, and we do plan to improve that, you know, for the public to just be able to launch canoes and kayaks and for anglers to come and fish. But, you know, there's a sort of an ongoing conversation that we'll have internally on, you know, does the recreation department want to have a program where they are training or offering boating lessons or something like that,
Right.
where there might need to be a second boat launch. But as far as a second public boat launch, you know, I think, you know, we have the existing one, we plan to improve it. And so we just need to, you know, have a little bit more discussion around those uses.
Great.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
thank you.
it's very possible that we won't need something formal. So I think it's sort of a watch and wait, which usually I don't really like, but but it's helpful to figure out how people are going to use the property and what they find is a barrier or what they feel like they'd like to have added, if anything.
One of the things that I recall you talking about early on is creating an accessible point where people could enter a kayak or enter a canoe if they were handicapped. And
Yes.
that's not possible right now from the Commonwealth Ave boat launch area. So I think we're looking at how we can provide for greater options, as well as the programmatic aspect of Gerow Park as a recreational hub. So that's
Actually,
also
that's a very good point. Thank you, because I had forgotten that we actually went to the Disability Commission and had a discussion with them, which is where sort of the idea of this, the schematic shows, you know, just basically 2 slots on one side but it actually is a mechanism that can be taken out of the water during the winter months that essentially you can put your boat in, and then it has rails, ADA rails on either side. So that was sort of what we were thinking about, but certainly that isn't part of this phase. We haven't put any money in for funding anything like that. So we'll, I guess, be interested in knowing if that would be something that people want to see or not.
Great. Well, thank you all for all your work on this project. It's going to be a great site.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else's. Oh, yes, Diane. Oh, she's gone. Okay. Does anybody else have anything? Any other questions? Anything they? Okay. All right, great. Well, then I really appreciate everybody coming on board and listening, and I appreciate Town Manager being here, and Director of Planning and Land Management, and Delia from Natural Resources, and Ryan. And I know some of our select board members were on, so I appreciate that. And we are going to look for kind of button this up and write up sort of what some of the things we talked about and have those available for folks. And then, of course, if anybody has any questions, you know, before or after that document comes out, you're welcome to reach out to any one of us.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah,
good
thanks.
job. Good job. It is an important project, and I think the hearing from the folks from West Concord really affirmed that this is something that's going to be a big. It's a benefit to the entire community, but a big benefit to them. And I know we are all concerned about the impact of COVID-19, but I don't want to lose sight of how this is going to benefit the community as well. So we're, like I said, we're going to keep working on balancing those concerns, and but it's a great plan.
I will say that I was going to say it, but you know, it's a really good problem to have in a way that there's not enough parking at our parks. So from a former park director and our current park director, you know, we're pumped about that.
Yeah, I think I think it speaks to the need for additional accessible, I mean, like accessible to the general public as well as accessible for people with disabilities, open spaces. I think we really learned that over time, that they are heavily used in Concord primarily by Concordians. And I think we saw firsthand through the summer that, the Lowell Road boat launch gets, really crowded. I mean, they just, every time we do patrols to make sure that the parking, that people aren't overcrowding the trails when they're supposed to be socially distancing. And I think that this additional capacity is needed where it's at, and is an addition, and is needed for additional capacity, like I said, for another option for folks. So I'm thrilled about the project. I think it's great, and I'm glad that folks from West Concord were here to kind of express their support.
All right, well, everybody enjoy your night. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Great job.
Okay,
Great night,
bye-bye.
everyone.